Okay, CrunchBites. We're back again. I'm here with the two Johns, John Henderson and John Jones. We're continuing our discussion of all the steps to becoming a game developer. Today we've reached the point of the interview, and we'll be discussing the phone interview versus the on-site interview. We'll briefly talk about the phone interview because it's pretty simple, it's a pretty straightforward idea. You don't have to dress up or prepare. For the most part, an interview, you just got to be yourself. Unless you're an asshole, then be somebody else. Now,
other asshole.
John Jones has some great ideas on this, and he's going to start us off. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Just so the first thing I think most people think after they get a phone interview lined up and scheduled is, oh shit, what the hell do I do between now and then? What do I prepare? What do I think? What do I do? What am I supposed to be thinking about? My suggestion is, first off, just research the company and their games. Play their games, borrow them if you need to, but at least spend some time playing one or two of them, enough to get a sense of what they're going for and why it's fun or why people think it's fun. Preferably, you'll find it fun, but if you don't and you more understand why other people think it's fun, maybe not the company for you, but still fill it out, because interviews are great practice, and you should always take an interview, if at all possible, unless you're forcing them to spend a lot of money on you for something you're totally not into, in which case you're kind of a dick. So understand the company's games and their culture, know when the company started and who founded it, make sure you know what kind of games they make, and make sure you can understand and articulate exactly why you, as a person, are interested in working with them as a company. Just so you can have a job is not a reason. I think that's the absolute baseline for going into any kind of just phone interview as a basis. You're not necessarily going to be tested to a great degree, but it's not unreasonable to expect them to ask, hey, have you played our games? It's almost like a code for, so, why do you give a shit about us? So as a starting point, that's kind of where I see, going into a phone interview. But I'll kick it off to you guys. John, what do you think? Phone interview prep. What the psychology, how to do, how not to do? What are your thoughts?
Well, the truth of the matter is that we wouldn't do phone interviews if there was infinite amount of time and space for everyone who's interested in every game job to just show up and be interviewed by someone one-on-one. That's not reality. That's never going to happen. The reason they do phone interviews is to weed people out and get a baseline, as you said, for whether they can actually stomach having them in the building across the table from someone else. But if you're actually in the interview, you can't think about any of that stuff. You prepare, you learn, you find out about the company, you find out about their games. Whatever their project is, you find out as much as you can on the outside, but then your focus needs to be on showing them what a great person you are, and that you would be a great fit for the kind of role that they're trying to fill. And that has to be your goal. And I just looked up, per preparation for this, what are the most common interview questions. And the first two, everyone ought to know. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? If you don't know yourself, you're not going to even be able to approach those questions or anything else related to who you are. And that is exactly what the interview is supposed to be, especially the phone interview, is what kind of person is this? Who are we getting? Because at that point, they've obviously gotten past the name and the resume and the portfolio and maybe some internet sleuthing about who they are. But now we need to find that where the rubber meets the road, can this guy even have a conversation with us and present himself as a decent human being? At least decent enough to work in a game industry. But you have to get to that point, and you have to focus on that much on. So learn the job, learn the people, and then present it yourself. Next caller.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying. Just to wrap up real quick on phone interview before we get to the actual on-site interview. Yeah, it's just a real brief conversation. I try to make it as personable as possible, as in just try to have a real conversation. Yeah, it's going to be mechanical, but they're going to have those questions they have to ask. It's going to be mechanical, like I said, but just try to make it a real conversation. Then they'll actually like your personality, because this is a personality test. And if they feel like, oh, I could have a beer with this guy, you're probably going to make it to the on-site interview. And if you
Sure.
guys think that's good, we can wrap it up and move right into Onsite, unless anybody wants to toss anything else on that phone interview.
Just one last thing. Have a real conversation, but you're speaking as a developer. Your interviewer or interviewers are not your fucking bro.
Yep.
Muy importante.
Yep. And to that point, even though it is a social interaction, don't put on airs. You have to be the very best version of yourself that you can be, but it has to be a true self, because you can't live out a lie. Certainly not when you're getting to know someone.
Exactly. Just present the sustainable self, not you at your absolute best case best, but know that you aspire toward that, but be realistic about what you're able to deliver. Just in an interview, fundamentally, you're presenting a bill of goods that you want people to pay for. You want people to pay to want you to be there. And if you wildly oversell that and can't fulfill what the promise was, you weren't as advertised, and that's your fault for misrepresenting yourself, and to some extent their fault for not catching it, but don't even bring it to that. Don't be a dick. Just be honest. Know what you're capable of and know what your limits are, and I find the more honest you are about that in a productive, constructive, positive-seeking way, the better you present yourself to an interviewer, than as though you're the absolute most perfect being that's ever existed for the junior assistant contract UI artist number 4.
I'm Batman. I want a job.
So, about the people you're interviewing.
Test. Okay, sorry. No, my mic just dropped. Sorry. I don't know what happened. Actually, my mic's kind of funking out.
Collar pull. Ooh.
All right, so let's move on to the actual on-site interview. But one piece of advice that I heard has nothing to do with an actual interview, but just in general, I've heard act like you are on a first date with someone. You're nice, you're listening, you're paying attention, you're being responsive.
Your dick is in your pants.
Mm-hmm. And I don't mean like on a first date if you're like a douche. I mean a first date if you're like a nice person. But on to the on-site interview. There's a lot of things to talk about here. We'll try to crunch it into as tight a space as possible. There's a lot of simple things. The way you dress, your hygiene. You don't want to show up in a tuxedo like in Step Brothers. Just dress casually. Jeans and a nice shirt. A t-shirt's fine, really. It's game development. You're not in front of the public. You're sitting in a dark corner somewhere programming or painting or whatever. A few just general things I'm going to run down here before we hand it over to Mr. Jones, because I know he's the man with the notes. Be personable. Try to be nice. I think enthusiasm is probably one of the biggest points, because you have to be enthusiastic about the product that you're going to be working on, the company you're going to be working at, and the people you're going to be working with. Enthusiasm is a form of energy that presents itself to others as youth, and people like that. Before I go into any anecdotes about showing interest in being wrong or being defensive, I would like to hand it off to Mr. Jones before we do that. So go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I completely agree with basically everything you said to this point. One additional thing I wanted to say is, when you're willing to connect with your interviewers and be funny and be interesting and wear a t-shirt, one thing I think a lot of younger game developers don't really get is that more and more women are coming into games and getting jobs working there, and I think there's a male locker room attitude toward a lot of development, and they just don't really know what it's like to be around girls or how to behave around girls, and they don't understand what's actually really shitty and really offensive. And I know it's not going to... It'll go further some places and others, just depending on culture, but it's worth starting to really, as a whole, think about just being more sensitive toward your coworkers, toward women, toward people of different races, different sexual orientations, just different anything. Just try and be a little more conscious of how you behave and the way you present yourself immediately up front so you don't automatically disqualify yourself.
Yeah, don't run in screaming racial slurs.
That's always a good starting point, I think. But sorry, that was a kind of a random aside, but it's something I've been thinking about lately. As far as, so let's say, okay, you have the on-site interview, you're ready to go, and you've gotten past the phone interview, so they don't think you're a complete freak. So what are your next steps? I suggest immediately asking whoever your contact is at that company, whether it's a recruiter or HR, whoever the person that's booking these interviews is, ask them directly, who am I interviewing with, what are their names, and what do they do? Find out as much as you can about the people you're going to meet, and then look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Moby Games, know their job titles, and imagine how you're going to be working with them if you get the job. And try and understand what your working relationship is going to be like. Find out what they've done before, who they've worked with, who you know in common, so you can say like, oh, wow, okay, so 3 jobs back, I worked with my buddy Bill. I'm going to hit up Bill saying, hey, I have this interview with this company, and I'm interviewing with this guy. What do you think of him? Not in a weird manipulative way, but just sort of like, oh, that guy, yeah, I know, he's a really fantastic artist. He got promoted into being a lead. He really likes craft beer and anime, and he and I used to hang out and do this thing. Don't be a douchebag about bringing up connections you have in common with other people, but at least know and understand a little bit about people, so that you can casually bring up in an interview when they're asking you serious questions, saying like, oh, hey, I know so and so from this company, and I found out you guys work together. We have this in common. Don't divert the interview tremendously, but being able to, this mainly only works if your friend is cool, the one that you have in common. But being able to have that kind of connection in common is helpful. It will show you did your homework to some extent, but still always try to keep it really on target and targeted toward the interview and the job and how you can best present yourself. But yeah, just do your research, just get all the intelligence you can, and understand this is the most important part. Know what to keep in your head, and just know and understand about the situation to be able to read the dynamics and how people interact with each other and how you might be working with them, and know that you don't have to tell them every single fucking little thing you know. Find the right time and find the right place. That's practice. That's a smart thing just in life in general, but also in interviews, and that's why you should interview as much as possible and think about these things.
Yep. Know things about people, the specific people that you're going to be interviewing with, but knowing about people in general. And what I said earlier about knowing yourself, if you are an introvert, if you are a person who doesn't get a whole lot of social interaction, understand that about yourself and find anyone who you're at least cool enough with, and practice your interview. Have them role play an interviewer so you can treat this person, someone you hopefully know longer than a couple hours, and have them and practice treating them like a human being. That could probably be the most invaluable thing, because you're going to be sitting across from a stranger that you've never known in public before, and you have to do the same thing with a stranger. And if you're a fan of their work, sometimes that could almost be an Achilles heel for people that are fans of video game work. Like, say you're going to work for the guy who made your favorite game, and you know that about him. There's a big difference between approaching someone like that as a fan and as a potential coworker, because professional game developers talk all the time about what they did on particular games, but you need to be able to ask those kinds of questions and get a rapport with them, so it doesn't sound like some fanboy off the street that they met at outside of GameSpot. That's not going to work for that, and it's not going to make them feel like, yeah, I could totally see that guy being around the office. And ultimately, that's the most important message that you need to convey to them, is that you're someone that you can be relied upon. That's all the information about the actual work that they'll talk about. But they probably already know that stuff, or they wouldn't have brought you into the interview at that point. At the point when you're sitting across the table from them talking about yourself, you need to be presenting yourself as someone that they could stand to have around or might actually like.
You're absolutely right. Like, if you're in a situation where you think you may fanboy the fuck out, just think, okay, if I fanboy out in this guy, in an interview, he's going to think I'm going to be like that every day for the rest of his life.
Or until we run out of things to talk about.
Oh, yes! Oh, my God.
Well, in wrestling, they call that marking out. And if you ever go to a wrestling school, if it's a proper school, they teach you not to mark out whenever you meet an actual like famous pro wrestler from WWF or whatever, because it's disrespectful.
There you go. Be like a professional wrestler.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot you can learn about being yourself. I just want to throw down just a couple of quick anecdotes. I've been on both ends of the interview process. I always like to ask fun questions. I always like to kind of, break the ice kind of thing, like a break the tension. Because, especially when you do an interview, my heart starts racing. I'm getting, oh boy, here we go. I get excited. You need to stay calm. Just chill out. I think you're echoing John Henderson, maybe. Yeah, I like to do basic break the ice kind of questions, like something like, hey, what's your favorite video games? What do you like to play? What do you like to do, like hobbies and things? These are just little things that I would say if you're in the process of, trying to hire somebody, think about these little things to just break the ice, make it a nice conversation. One of the things that I've run into a few times when having people come in for interviews is them, and we talked about this earlier, guys, they show an interest and say, okay, I come by your desk and you've got look at that cool action figure you've got on your desk, and then they're like, oh, I like that, and then say the wrong thing, as in it's not the same, it's not the right character, or not the right genre, or whatever. It's when you're just excessively wrong about something subtle. That's the kind of, it's the little things that will tip people off that this guy's an asshole. They'll remember that more than they'll remember your work. I
love Optimus Prime. That's a Tonka truck, you idiot.
Yeah.
Why do you have a Tonka truck on your desk?
One of the things, when you're on an interview, they're going to question everything. As in, in my experience, they always ask, they read through my resume without me looking at it, and I have to basically, recite it so that they know it's true and not a bunch of bullshit. But I have run into this before with people who have done interviews, and you ask them a question or whatever, and they get defensive about questioning a skill that they have. And in my experience, even if it's true or not, it kind of exposes you as a fraud. And not necessarily that you're really a fake, but it just makes you look bad. It makes you look like a piece of crap. If you immediately no, I can do that. I can do that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, then do it. Show us. If you get defensive about something and aren't ready to immediately pick up a pencil and start drawing and show that you can draw, then you can't draw. Anybody else? Or should we go into your questions, John?
Actually, wow, 18 minutes, longest CrunchBites ever. I don't have
so much info.
I don't have a ton more, but just in terms of length of content, but I really think this is the most important part of an interview. This is what the interviewers are going to test you on the most. What you think about, what you prioritize, and how you care about the questions you ask them. Because questions are two-way. If you're thinking about an interview as, this is going to save my life, this is going to be what I need, this is going to be the thing that makes something turn into something else that I like more than the thing that I had before if I got this job. If you're thinking of it as any kind of savior to wherever you are in life, then you're thinking of it exactly the wrong way. Because you need to find out if they're good enough for you, if it's going to be a fit for you, for your attitude, for your personality, for the kind of culture you care about, for the kind of video games you enjoy working on. You need to have non-dickish questions for them the same way that they have questions for you, so you can figure each other out. And the questions people ask says a hell of a lot about them and their personality, so in a way, if you have really good questions to ask on an interview, you're doing yourself another favor. So, my starting point would be, imagine the working relationships you might have and ask intelligent questions about it. Who's my lead? Who do I report to? Who are my colleagues? How will I be working with you, interviewer, on a day-to-day basis? What are our interactions like? So I really enjoy showing people I interview with, this is how I'm thinking about the job, and this is the way I'm trying to get an idea of whether I'm even a fit for it. And I've always taken the attitude of, this may not be the right thing for me, but let's see if we get along, let's see what works. Because if you don't seem desperate, you seem a lot more appealing. Another question. What are some of the unique challenges of working here? That always gets interesting answers, like in my mind, because I don't think a lot of interviewers are used to being challenged or having an in-depth, potentially in-depth question directed back at them. I think it can be a good thing if it doesn't seem like you're trying to change a subject or deflect back to them. But if you can just say, what's different about working here in your experience, you as a person? What's different about working here that I need to know as a fellow developer? And generate some examples of your own from the kinds of games they develop. Play the games a bit and say, okay, well, you're an open world game, but you do this particular thing, or you have this interesting kind of art style, or this or that. Is this kind of thing a challenge? That shows them that you're thinking about the kind of game that that they're working on, and how you can apply yourself to the challenges of it. Will show them you're thinking. Ask them why they like working there. To some degree, you're going to get some fairly fluffy answers, but if you pay really close attention to people and how they answer and what they say or don't say, that can tell you a lot about the place and whether it's right for you. One of my favorite things, actually my very favorite thing, is I try and put this in toward the end of an interview. I ask them, my interviewers, what does successfully fulfilling this role look like to you day to day? If you hired the perfect person for this job, what's their day to day look like? What does your day look like, and how are they succeeding? That's kind of my favorite oddball, and I think this is the first time I've talked about this publicly. But the answers you will get from that and the way people will react are going to be really, really damn interesting. And I've never gotten a negative reaction from asking that question. But I've tried really hard not to act like a prick about it. There's definitely a wrong way to do it. And very last thing, this may not be the right one to ask all the time, but how long has the average employee at your company worked there?
Ooh.
You'll probably not get an honest answer about that, but how long they pause, whether they maintain eye contact, and what their answer is going to say a lot. But the answer are socially awkward, and they're going to react how they're going to react. But that one is one of my favorite ones to drop at the end of a difficult interview. If it's going well, don't fucking ask that.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. I like that.
But that's all I had as far as that goes.
Nice. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Henderson, or should we wrap it up?
I'll be quick. The nice thing to remember about all John's questions is that they are about being part of the team and being part of that particular workplace. It's not about you at that point. It's about you being part of that group or not being part of that group. And also think about the interviewers themselves. I mean, most of them, especially in the game environment, a lot of them they may be leads and they're probably seniors, but they're probably just rank and file. They do their work all the time, and that's what they're normally focused on. They're going to be concerned about who the new guy is. You're going to get an FNG at some point. An FNG stands for fucking new guy. But beyond that, they're probably not experienced interviewers, except just by rote, having done it again and again. They probably don't have quite as many tips unless they watch Crunchcast and listen to John Jones talk about it. But beyond that, you just need to understand them. They're here because, just like you, they like working there, ideally, and they're game industry professionals, just like you want to be.
Nice.
There you go.
So yeah, that sounds like a pretty good wrap-up point. If you guys want to hear more about interviews, we have a CrunchBites called Interview Prep. It was the 5th episode of CrunchBites that goes into this a little bit more, as well as Crunchcast number 30, which is about VFX and interview etiquette. Just more info to pick up. And Yeah, we'll be back next time with, I think, a little bit about relocation or starting a new job, depending on what we had the best notes on. So thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for being here, John and John, and we'll see you next time.